What would happen if you went into a jungle where every tree could hide a killer, every puddle could drown you, and the air was filled with death? This wasn't a dream. It was Earth millions of years ago, when the harshest ecosystems weren't deserts or seas, but prehistoric rainforests full of huge bugs, amphibians that ate flesh, poisonous swamps, and scary creatures that came out at night. We go into the world's deadliest and scariest jungles in this video. These are places so dangerous that even the dinosaurs were scared to live there. Welcome to Hell Creek, the final jungle before the impact. Consider stepping into a world where the air is sticky and full of big bugs, and you can hear the roar of a monster far away. About 66 million years ago, this is the Hell Creek Formation, a rich, swampy, ancient jungle that used to be in parts of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. The time of the dinosaurs was coming to an end, and it was a bad dream. Hell Creek wasn't just a jungle, it was a battlefield. The land was covered in dense ferns, tall conifer trees, and tangled undergrowth that made it nearly impossible to run. Rivers crisscrossed the forest floor, forming swamps and oxbow lakes. These wet zones created perfect ambush sites for some of the deadliest creatures Earth had ever known. At the top of the food chain was Tyrannosaurus rex. This wasn't just a giant predator, it was a super predator. Reaching up to 40 feet long and weighing more than 9 tons, T-Rex had the strongest bite force of any land animal, possibly capable of crushing bone in a single chomp. But what made it even more terrifying was the way it hunted. Scientists believe T-Rex was both a scavenger and an active predator. In the crowded jungle, it may have used surprise attacks, ambushing prey that wandered too close to a bend in the river or a shadowy grove. But Hell Creek was not ruled by one beast. It was crawling with other dangers. Dakota raptor, a massive raptor about 16 feet long with sharp claws and a fast, agile build, hunted in packs. Its sickle-shaped toe claw could slice through flesh with ease. Fossils suggest that these raptors may have targeted smaller herbivores, but wouldn't hesitate to swarm and overwhelm a juvenile ceratopsian or even a young T-Rex if the opportunity was right. The herbivores were no less monstrous. Triceratops, one of the most iconic dinosaurs of all time, lived here in large numbers. These three-horned tanks were 30 feet long and likely traveled in herds. With powerful horns and a shield-like frill, they were capable of goring predators in defense. Triceratops bones often show bite marks from T-Rex, with some bones also showing signs of healing, proof that not every attack was fatal. Alongside Triceratops grazed Edmontosaurus, a massive duck-billed dinosaur that could reach lengths of 40 feet. While it lacked horns or armor, its size alone made it a challenge for predators. It may have used its muscular tail and herd behavior as defense. Some fossilized skin impressions from Edmontosaurus even show scales, meaning this was a creature that looked like a cross between a horse-sized lizard and a duck. Threats were not just on land, though. There were ancient crocodiles like Borealisuchus living in Hell Creek's rivers and lakes. These animals could sneak up on dinosaurs while they drank. Axestomes, a turtle that was as big as a baby pool, and Lepisosteus, a fish with long mouths full of needle-like teeth, were also there. If you fell into one of these rivers, you would be killed by the jaw-snapping water and pulling currents. And let's not forget the insects. Hell Creek's jungle hosted buzzing swarms of giant beetles, primitive wasps, and oversized dragonflies. While not dangerous like the dinosaurs, their sheer size and number would have added to the chaos, creating an environment that was noisy, hot, and constantly alive with motion. The weather was no comfort either. The climate was tropical to subtropical, with frequent storms, heavy rainfall, and a humidity level that made it feel like breathing through a wet cloth. Temperatures may have reached 80 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, with no modern fans or breezes to cool anything down. Volcanic activity from nearby regions could also have filled the air with ash or sulfurous fumes. All of this puts life and death under a lot of stress. Fossil beds in Hell Creek show a lot of different kinds of animals piled up together. Many of them may have been killed by quick floods or strong storms. Some layers show that the sides of rivers fell apart, drowning whole groups of dinosaurs. Scientists can see a picture of the chaos at these mass death sites because they are so well kept. Giant, flesh-eating amphibians of the Permian swamp. The Earth was already full of scary creatures long before the first dinosaur walked on it. The Prehistoric was one of the weirdest and scariest. It was a huge amphibian that lived in warm swamps during the Permian period, about 270 million years ago. Don't think of amphibians as slippery, small animals like frogs or salamanders. This beast was over 30 feet long, longer than most alligators that live today. Prehistoric lived in what is now Brazil, in a region that used to be covered in humid, stagnant wetlands. These swamps were warm, low in oxygen, and full of murky water that limited visibility, perfect for an ambush predator. Its body was long and eel-like, with a broad, flat skull and hundreds of sharp, interlocking teeth lining its jaws. It looked like a cross between a modern-day crocodile and a massive salamander, but it was neither. It belonged to a now extinct group of amphibians called temnospondyls, which came in all shapes and sizes, but none as terrifying as this. What made the Prehistoric so dangerous was the way it hunted. In contrast to later predators that moved quickly, this frog was a slow killer. It would hide under the water's surface so you could barely see it. Its eyes would stick out above the water like a current alligator. As soon as a fish or small lizard got too close, it would jump up and snap its jaws shut very hard. Its long, narrow teeth helped it grab slippery food and hold on tight while it fought. It wasn't just fish either. Some scientists think that Prehistoric may have sneaked up on other amphibians and even small snakes, and then dragged them underwater to kill them. The swamps it called home were nightmarish in their own right. The Permian landscape was a greenhouse world. Temperatures were high, and there were few seasons. Forests of giant club mosses, tree ferns, and seed-bearing plants grew in thick tangles along the water's edge. Many plants were spore-producing and lacked flowers or fruit. The air was thick with moisture, and the ground was often soggy or underwater. Insects like early dragonflies, beetles, and millipedes shared the underbrush, but everything was much larger than we see today. Giant insects buzzed overhead, and the buzzing was constant. Scientists think that Prehistoric had a very fast metabolism, which is even scarier. Today's frogs are cold-blooded and need warmth to stay active. Prehistoric, on the other hand, may have had some metabolic flexibility that let it stay active in cooler circumstances. This means that it could have hunted both during the hot day and during the cooler evening or night. This meant that there was no real safety in the swamp. Fossils of Prehistoric were first found in the Parnaíba Basin of Brazil, in rock layers known as the Pedra de Fogo Formation. These fossil beds contain evidence of a complex swamp ecosystem filled with fish, early reptiles, and various amphibians. The bones of Prehistoric itself are massive. Skull fragments alone are several feet long. Some scientists initially debated whether it was truly an amphibian or some kind of reptile, but today it is widely accepted as the largest amphibian that ever lived. Its sheer size alone would have made it a top predator, but its adaptations made it even more efficient. Unlike reptiles, amphibians need moist environments to survive, and Prehistoric had the perfect home. The jungle-like swamp was covered in water most of the year. During drier seasons, the deeper pools would have concentrated prey, turning the remaining water into a brutal feeding ground. Prehistoric also had strong paddle-like limbs and a muscular tail, perfect for fast bursts of speed in water. On land, it would have been clumsy and slow, dragging its body like a massive salamander. But in the water, it moved like a snake, twisting, lunging, and vanishing in seconds. Some scientists believe it may have even used its body to stir up silt from the river bottom, confusing prey just before striking. The end of the Permian was a very bad time in Earth's past. The event that caused it killed off over 90% of sea species and 70% of land animals. It was caused by huge volcanic explosions, changes in the weather, and a lack of air. Prehistoric and many of its neighbors that lived in swamps went extinct for good. Titanoboa, the 50-foot serpent that ruled a tropical inferno. The Earth was not at all quiet 60 million years ago, a long time after the dinosaurs died out. A monster slithered through the tangled plants and swam through dark river channels in the hot, stuffy jungle that is now Colombia. There was a huge snake that lived in the past. It was called Titanoboa. This snake, which was more than 50 feet long and more than a ton heavy, didn't just live in the woods, it was in charge. Titanoboa thrived during the Paleocene epoch, just a few million years after the asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous period. Life was recovering, forests were spreading, and the tropics were hotter and more humid than today, possibly reaching over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity above 90%. These intense conditions were perfect for cold-blooded reptiles, and Titanoboa took full advantage. The first fossils of this serpent were discovered in the Cerrejón coal mines of northern Colombia, a place where giant trees and thick ferns once formed an endless tropical rainforest. Miners began uncovering massive vertebrae, bones so large they looked like they belonged to a dinosaur. But they weren't. They were snake bones, huge ones. Paleontologists identified them as belonging to a boa-like constrictor, but this snake was nothing like its modern cousins. It was a super predator. Titanoboa's size alone made it virtually untouchable in its environment. Its body was thick as an oil drum, and its jaws could open wide enough to swallow a crocodile whole, which, by the way, it probably did regularly. In fact, fossils from Cerrejón also include remains of Dirosaurids, ancient relatives of modern crocodiles. These crocs grew up to 20 feet long and lived in the same rivers and swamps as Titanoboa. But analysis of the fossil record suggests that many of them were prey. With no large land mammals around yet, these crocodilian cousins likely formed the bulk of Titanoboa's diet. It would have ambushed them from beneath the water's surface, coiled its massive body around them, and squeezed until bones cracked and organs collapsed. Unlike venomous snakes, Titanoboa killed through constriction, wrapping its powerful coils around its prey and tightening with each breath the animal tried to take. The pressure was so intense it likely caused instant organ failure in some cases. Then, using its stretchy ligaments and elastic jaws, Titanoboa could swallow the victim whole and digest it over days. But Titanoboa wasn't just a jungle crawler. It likely spent much of its time in water. Like modern anacondas, its heavy body would have been easier to support in rivers and swamps. Its nostrils were positioned toward the top of its snout, allowing it to breathe while submerged, and its long body would have made it a deadly ambush predator, able to hide in the muddy riverbed and strike with terrifying speed. Even the bush itself was very harsh. The fossil record from the Cerrejón Formation shows tall palm trees, huge ferns, and lots of undergrowth. These plants were able to survive the high heat and wetness. This is where some of the oldest known banana and avocado plants grew. Bugs were big, and birds were just starting to change into what they are today. But most of the animals were snakes, and Titanoboa was the biggest of them all. Researchers can learn a lot about past temperatures from Titanoboa, which is one of its most interesting features. Animals with cold blood get bigger when it's hot outside because they need heat to stay busy. Because Titanoboa is so big, it makes me think that the tropics in the Paleocene were much hotter than they are now. They may have been the hottest jungles Earth has ever seen. This helps paleoclimatologists figure out how the Earth got back on its feet after the Great Extinction. There are no complete skeletons of Titanoboa. Most of what we know comes from dozens of individual vertebrae. But from those bones, scientists have reconstructed what this snake might have looked like. Dark, camouflage skin, a thick, muscular body, and a head large enough to envelop a grown human without effort. Arthropleura and the insect overlords of the Carboniferous. 300 million years ago, before dinosaurs lived on Earth, a different kind of fear ruled the world. Welcome to the Carboniferous period, when oxygen levels were through the roof, woods were thick and wet, and arthropods and insects grew to be huge. The creepiest creature in this bug kingdom was called Arthropleura. It looked like a millipede and was up to 9 feet long. It had a lot of legs and was longer than a big man. Arthropleura lived in the warm, swampy forests of what is now North America and Europe. The Carboniferous landscape was filled with towering lycopod trees, enormous ferns, and thick layers of decaying plants. There were no flowering plants, no birds, and no mammals. Just a dense, moist world of primitive vegetation and giant invertebrates. The air was richer in oxygen than it is today, as high as 35% compared to the current 21%. That extra oxygen allowed insects and arthropods to grow much larger than they can now, because they didn't rely on lungs, but rather a passive breathing system through holes in their exoskeletons called spiracles. In this supercharged atmosphere, Arthropleura thrived. It resembled a modern millipede, but on a scale that defies imagination. Its armor-plated segments were like living shields, and it moved through the underbrush with surprising speed. Fossilized trackways show that it could travel long distances and navigate through fallen logs, tree roots, and leaf litter. Scientists believe it was likely herbivorous, feeding on decaying plant matter, but its massive size and alien appearance would have made it terrifying to witness in person. But Arthropleura wasn't alone. The Carboniferous jungle was teeming with other insect titans. One of the most famous was Meganeura, a dragonfly-like insect with a wingspan of over 2.5 feet. It soared through the air like a modern hawk, hunting smaller insects with its powerful jaws. Meganeura had compound eyes, rapid reflexes, and a lightweight body, making it a deadly aerial predator. Crawling below were giant cockroach-like insects, some as large as your hand, and scorpions the size of house cats. Fossilized remains of these creatures show strong pincers, thick exoskeletons, and sometimes even the curved tails we associate with modern scorpions. They would have hunted smaller bugs or scavenged in the thick, humid undergrowth. Everything felt so strange this time, which made it so creepy. It wasn't flower or fruit season in the woods. Spores, like those found in mosses and mushrooms, were used for breeding instead. Pollen, mist, and dead things were thick in the air. The steady drizzle and high humidity made it easy for mold and bacteria to grow everywhere. Through the tall plants, the sun barely hit the ground, making a dark green world full of forms that moved, buzzed, and skittered. It's important to understand that insects and arthropods were not just background creatures in this ecosystem. They ruled it. There were no large terrestrial vertebrates during the early Carboniferous. Amphibians had started to move onto land, but they were still small, slow, and dependent on water. That meant Arthropleura and its fellow arthropods had little competition, or natural predators. This brief moment in Earth's history gave them free rein to evolve into truly gigantic forms. Some scientists debate whether Arthropleura was entirely harmless. Its size alone would have made it nearly untouchable to early predators, and there's some speculation that it may have defended itself with a noxious chemical spray or by rearing up like some modern millipedes do. While it lacked fangs or claws, its sheer bulk and armor would have made attacking it a risky move for anything smaller than a truck. The sky was alive, giant predatory birds and insect swarms. When you looked up in a jungle from a long time ago, there were no blue skies or peaceful groups of birds. You looked out into chaos. During some times in Earth's history, the sky was a battlefield, full of buzzing giants, predators that dove-bombed, and creatures with wings that are so long that they would make current hawks look like pigeons. The sky was full of life, and it killed people. Let's begin with the Phorus racids, also known as terror birds. These flightless but lightning-fast carnivores ruled the skies of South America after the dinosaurs vanished. The largest of them, like Kelencan, stood nearly 10 feet tall with a massive hooked beak that could crush skulls. Though technically grounded, they were aerial in origin, descendants of flying birds that had evolved into land-based killing machines. But they weren't alone. Some terror birds could glide or flap just enough to leap onto prey from above, crashing down in ambush like feathery hammers. Now take a step back. Pterosaurs ruled the skies during the Mesozoic, long before these birds. These were not dinosaurs. They were flying animals, and some of them got really big. Quetzalcoatlus was one of the biggest. Its wings were over 30 feet long, which is about the same as a small plane. It may have stalked riverbanks and marsh edges, spearing fish, small dinosaurs, or dead animals with its long beak, as shown by fossils. Some, like Tsungaripterus, had teeth that were great for crushing shellfish, while smaller species sped through the trees of the jungle looking for bugs. But it wasn't just the big ones you had to worry about. The Carboniferous and early Permian periods were swarming with giant insects, especially thanks to the high oxygen levels. Imagine dragonflies the size of crows. Meganeura, the most famous, had a wingspan of nearly 30 inches and flew like a predator, snapping up smaller bugs mid-air. Their flight was silent, precise, and deadly. Worse still were the swarms. Insects like early mayflies, beetles, and cockroach ancestors bred in explosive numbers. Entire clouds of them would darken the skies, especially during breeding seasons. With no humans around to control or clear land, the jungles grew thick and choked with underbrush, the perfect breeding ground for countless bugs. Even without giant size, their numbers were terrifying. Some insects took things even further. Fossil evidence points to giant lacewings, predatory insects with net-like wings that could hover and ambush prey from mid-air. Their larvae had piercing mouthparts capable of draining fluid from other bugs. These were airborne assassins. Then came the earliest birds, like Archaeopteryx and Confuciusornis, halfway between dinosaur and modern bird. With clawed wings and toothed beaks, they hunted insects, lizards, and maybe even each other. Forest canopies rang out with their calls as they flapped between branches in search of prey. These creatures were agile, fast, and well adapted to dense foliage, giving them an edge in ambush attacks from above. But it wasn't just animal predators that made the sky lethal. The weather did too. Prehistoric jungles were hotbeds of sudden electrical storms, especially in the Mesozoic and Paleocene. Massive storm clouds built up over the steaming canopy, unleashing lightning strikes, torrential rains, and wind gusts strong enough to knock over trees. Combined with airborne predators, these conditions turned the sky into a true hazard zone. One moment you're running from a hungry bird. The next, you're dodging falling branches and blinding rain. Think about how loud it would be. Hundreds of buzzing bugs, birds screaming, wings moving, and thunder in the distance. Bugs didn't make sweet noises. They made unbearable noises as they buzzed, rattled, and hummed. Stridulation, or rubbing body parts together, was a way for many early insects to talk to each other or scare off competitors. In the bush, this could make a wall of noise that was hard to handle, especially at dusk or dawn when there were lots of bugs. Some experts think that the sheer number of living things in the air caused an arms race in evolution. Dinosaurs and early animals improved their hearing, night vision, and even their feathers, which they used for more than just flight. They also used them to keep warm and hide in a world with lots of noise. This constant threat from above shaped how animals developed on the ground. Murder plants, when jungle flora turned carnivorous. To most of us, wood's a picture of places where animals hunt and plants grow. But what if some of those plants weren't just standing there? Why don't they kill too? Before Venus flytraps and pitcher plants were around, some old plants may have come up with simple ways to catch and kill animals, making some parts of the jungle into a scary, leafy show. In the fossil record, especially in swampy Permian and Mesozoic layers, researchers have found remains of small amphibians and insects, oddly clustered near fern-like seed plants and certain ancient tree roots. Some experts believe this might not be a coincidence. These plants, including groups like pteridosperms or seed ferns, had strange sticky structures and cup-like appendages. Though there's no direct evidence of full carnivory, their morphology hints at possible insect-trapping behavior, a kind of primitive precursor to the deadly flowers we see today. In modern ecosystems, carnivorous plants like sundews, pitchers, and bladderworts evolved as a response to nutrient-poor soils. They trap insects and absorb their nutrients to supplement the minerals they can't get from the ground. It's not hard to imagine that in the soggy, acidic soils of prehistoric jungles, especially in stagnant swamps with poor drainage, similar pressures may have driven some plants to begin experimenting with passive traps, sticky surfaces, or even chemical lures. The Carboniferous and early Permian periods were especially ripe for this. Giant club mosses and tree ferns towered overhead, while undergrowth festered in shade and rot. Certain protocarnivorous plants may have grown near waterlogged pits or root traps. If a small creature, say a frog-like amphibian or a crawling insect, got too close, it might become stuck in sap-like resin or trapped in a curled leaf. Over time, the body would decay, feeding the plant indirectly through decomposing organic matter in the soil. Medullosa is a group of seed ferns with complicated leaf bases and thick root mats that could be an early plant horror. Some species grew in thickets that were hard to get through near water, making it easy for small animals to trip and fall into wet, low-oxygen pits. Groups of arthropods have been found in these zones in fossil beds, but again, clear links are still being discussed. Still, scientists are interested in the idea that interactions between plants and animals in the past may have been much more complex and dangerous than they thought. Fast forward to the Cretaceous, and we begin to see the rise of angiosperms, or flowering plants. This evolutionary explosion brought with it a new level of jungle warfare. These plants used bright colors, sweet smells, and nectar to lure pollinators, but some took it further. Fossils of early proto-pitcher plants from around 80 million years ago suggest that they may have been using pitfall traps even then. These early pitchers likely targeted ants, beetles, and flying insects, turning the humid air and dense foliage into a maze of floral death traps. One fossil from Myanmar's amber, which dates back to the Middle Cretaceous, shows a gnat stuck on what looks like the sticky gland of a very early sundew. The explanation is still being looked over, but it gives us one of the first signs that sticky and smelly plants may have used these properties to attract and catch insects in the past. Also, the scary mix of plants and bacteria should be mentioned. Many of Earth's woods were burned down or buried after the KT extinction event, and fungus blooms covered large areas. Some of these fungus woods may have made growths that looked like traps or gases that made small animals lose their balance and become immobile. Fossilized animal bones found in petrified forest floors show that whole food chains broke down into rot-filled pits, where plants and fungi grew and spread for months. It's easy to see how natural dangers and biological traps worked together in ancient jungles, which had a lot of thick vegetation, low airflow, and constant rain. Some plants may have developed defenses like snares, with bent thorns, slippery stalks, and leaf folds that trapped or crushed bugs that were looking for nectar. Others may have released acids or enzymes into the earth to get nutrients from dead organic matter, making it hard to tell the difference between plants and animals that eat them. The crocodile that hunted dinosaurs, Sarcosuchus in the river jungle. If you think crocodiles today are scary, wait until you meet Sarcosuchus, a monster from the past that is sometimes called supercroc. This monster lived in the Middle Cretaceous period about 110 million years ago. It wasn't just a fish and small animal hunter. Some dinosaurs that got too close to the water may have been actively killed by it. Sarcosuchus was the best at sneaking up on its prey in the thick, wet river jungles of what is now northern Africa. Sarcosuchus reached lengths of 40 feet and weighed around 8 tons, making it about twice as long and 4 times heavier than the largest modern Nile crocodiles. Its long, armored body was equipped with thick scutes, bony plates embedded in its skin, and a broad snout filled with over 130 sharp teeth. These weren't teeth for slicing or chewing. They were built for grabbing and holding, the kind of tool you'd expect from a killer that lunged, clamped down, and dragged prey into the depths. Fossils of Sarcosuchus have been found in places like the Elraz Formation in Niger, an ancient floodplain once covered in winding rivers, marshes, and forested edges. The environment was hot, sticky, and teeming with life. This jungle-like terrain was home to a wide range of dinosaurs, including ornithopods, sauropods, and smaller theropods, and for Sarcosuchus, they were all potential targets. Unlike today's crocs, which tend to specialize in either fish or small terrestrial prey, Sarcosuchus had the size and strength to challenge even mid-sized dinosaurs. Its enormous jaw structure suggests it had a powerful bite, though not quite as bone-crushing as T-Rex. Instead, it relied on stealth, surprise, and brute force. Scientists believe it likely hunted at the water's edge, waiting silently like a living log. When an unsuspecting dinosaur, perhaps a young Uranosaurus or a thirsty theropod, bent down to drink, Sarcosuchus would explode from the shallows in a violent ambush. And it didn't need to kill its prey instantly. It could pull them underwater, where it had the upper hand. Like modern crocs, it likely used a death roll, spinning its body to disorient and break the limbs of its struggling victim. Drowning was just the beginning. Once the prey was immobilized, Sarcosuchus would tear off chunks or swallow smaller prey whole. Its long tubular snout had an odd bulb-shaped swelling at the end, known as a bulla. Some researchers speculate this may have been used for resonating sound, possibly for communication or mating displays. Others believe it might have been a display structure like a visual signal to other Sarcosuchus in murky waters. Whatever its purpose, it adds to the weird alien appearance of this ancient predator. The river jungle it lived in was no less menacing. Dense ferns and tall conifers lined the banks. Insects buzzed in the steamy air. The ground was soft, often flooded, and full of footprints from wandering dinosaurs. This ecosystem was a tangle of danger, and Sarcosuchus sat right in the middle of it, like a trap hidden in plain sight. While Sarcosuchus likely spent most of its time in water, its limbs were strong enough for limited movement on land. It may have used this to bask in the sun, or drag itself to new hunting spots when water levels shifted. However, its size would have made it awkward and slow on land, further emphasizing its role as a water-based predator, a master of ambush and pressure rather than pursuit. What's even more remarkable about Sarcosuchus is that it wasn't really a crocodile in the modern sense. This animal was part of a different group called Phyllidosauриds. It had many similarities to current crocodiles, but it evolved later in the tree of life. Throughout Earth's past, many groups of crocodile-like animals turned into huge killers that hid in wait. Sarcosuchus was one of the scariest of these. The forest that ate everything. Post-impact toxic jungles. The dinosaurs were not the only ones killed when the rock hit Earth 66 million years ago. The world became a trap for death. The skies got dark, the seas got more acidic, and the land was almost impossible to live on for months or even years. But the horror was stranger in the jungle environments that were still there after the first impact. When these woods got full of ash, poison, and fungus, they changed into something new. Poisonous jungles that ate all living things. Let's start with what happened immediately after the asteroid impact. The blast, centered near today's Yucatan Peninsula, released energy equal to billions of nuclear bombs. Trees were flattened for hundreds of miles. Shock waves ignited global wildfires. Soot and vaporized rock blasted into the atmosphere, forming a dense cloud that blocked sunlight. Within days, the Earth plunged into a kind of impact winter, cold, dark, and deadly. But in certain parts of the world, especially tropical regions near the equator, the forests didn't vanish completely. Instead, they mutated into something stranger. Without light, many plants died, but fungi exploded. Spores from molds, mushrooms, and rotting organisms bloomed like never before. These dark forests became dominated by decomposers, feeding off the carcasses of plants and animals that couldn't survive the collapse of the food chain. Fossil records show that right after the impact, there's a noticeable layer of fungal spores in many sediment cores worldwide, often called the fungal spike. This suggests that mushrooms and molds became the dominant life form in many places. In what were once vibrant jungles filled with dinosaurs, now grew mats of black decay. Picture a forest of fallen logs, half-dead trees, and carpets of white fuzz feeding on the corpses of everything that had once thrived. But the horror doesn't stop with fungus. The death of so much plant life also released massive amounts of methane and carbon dioxide, especially in swampy areas. As the plant matter rotted, it belched toxic gases, and in some places, these gases may have reached concentrations high enough to kill animals through asphyxiation. Swamp gases like hydrogen sulfide are especially dangerous. Not only do they smell like rotten eggs, but in high concentrations, they shut down nervous systems and cause rapid death. The soils, once rich with nutrients, turned acidic. Rainfall mixed with ash and sulfur in the atmosphere created acid rain, which burned leaves, stripped bark, and poisoned water sources. In lowland forests and basins, this rain collected in stagnant pools, forming acidic, chemical-rich lakes that looked like water but burned anything that tried to drink or swim. The early mammals, small lizards, and birds that did make it through had to deal with a new kind of danger. Some places still had high temperatures and high humidity, but the environment was out of balance. Food chains broke down, a lot of insects died off, then a lot of them came back. The scavengers started to eat more of their own kind. There was a strong smell of rot and mold in the bush, and even as light began to return in the months and years after the impact, the new jungles didn't go back to normal. They became overrun with opportunistic species, fast-growing ferns, moldy creepers, and mosses that smothered everything else. Entire sections of forest may have functioned like living traps. Thick vines and soft soil covered up pits filled with decay and gas. Step into the wrong part of the jungle, and you'd sink, suffocate, or vanish entirely beneath a carpet of rot. Some experts think that in some places, this poisonous forest phase may have lasted for decades. In these strange and dangerous places, a new type of jungle life began to form. Hardy mammals with sharp senses, birds that could find food in rotting matter, and bugs that ate corpses instead of flowers. This was a harsh test where only the toughest people made it out alive. Therizinosaurs, the jungle sloth demons with killing claws. You would probably run away if you were in an ancient jungle and saw a 15-foot tall feathered creature with arms longer than a man and claws the size of scythes. Quickly, they are one of the weirdest and scariest dinosaurs that have ever lived in the bushes. What it looked like was a mix of a sloth, a huge bird, and a monster from a fiction book, but it was real and very dangerous. Therizinosaurs lived during the late Cretaceous period, roughly 70 million years ago, and roamed the thick, wet forests of Asia and North America. Fossils of species like Therizinosaurus chiloniformis have been found in Mongolia, while others, like Nothronicus, were discovered in the American Southwest. These places were once covered in humid jungles and tangled floodplains, the perfect setting for a stealthy, strange-looking herbivore that could also defend itself like a monster. Despite their horrifying appearance, Therizinosaurs were mostly herbivores. Their skulls were small and their teeth leaf-shaped, ideal for slicing vegetation. But their claws? Those were another story. The claws on each hand could be over 3 feet long, longer than a grown man's arm, and were curved like reaping hooks. Some scientists believe they were used for pulling down branches or stripping leaves. Others aren't so sure. With claws that massive and sharp, it's hard not to think of defense or even aggression. Standing upright on 2 legs, these dinosaurs had wide hips, long necks, and feathers covering much of their bodies. Their build was strange, pot-bellied and bulky in the middle, yet with powerful arms and thick legs. They may have looked slow, but their anatomy suggests they were surprisingly agile, able to turn quickly and swipe with force. Picture something like a feathered tank, but with the reflexes of a bear. Therizinosaurs were part of the theropod group, the same group that includes T-Rex and Velociraptor, which makes their herbivorous lifestyle even stranger. Somewhere along the evolutionary line, this group of meat-eaters took a hard left turn and became plant-eaters with claws that could still tear flesh if needed. In an ecosystem full of predators, this adaptation may have helped them survive. Visualize getting lost in one of their old woods. The roof is tall, so it blocks a lot of the sun. Every space is filled with ferns and tall bushes. There's shuffling, and then something comes out. It has feathers, is big, and moves slowly. It's free, it just looks. Then it lifts one long arm, showing those hooked claws that look like a scared bird's claws. You stop moving. Is it letting you know? Going hunting? Or just interested? According to some experts, these animals may have lived in small groups where they helped each other watch out for danger. Animals of the same species could have fought over territory or mates with their claws, not just for plants or self-defense. One of those claws could do more than just cut. It could also remove organs. There is no way a top hunter like a small tyrannosaur would mess with one. Their large gut and strange pelvis also suggest they may have had fermentation chambers, similar to how cows digest plants. That would explain the huge belly. Inside, microbes broke down tough leaves and fibrous material, turning their jungle diet into fuel for such a massive body. But all that digestion would have made them slow-moving and gassy, possibly giving them a powerful odor too. They may have smelled awful, which could have helped warn predators or rivals. Therizinosaur fossils have been found in sediments that once formed river valleys, wet jungles, and semi-tropical forests, hinting at their preference for lush vegetation and dense cover. These weren't animals of the open plains. They lived in places where things could hide, stalk, or spring from the shadows. And while they weren't hunters, they were built for the chaos of the jungle. The bug boom, when oxygen made insects giants. Picture yourself sitting still in a clearing in the woods and hearing what sounds like a motorbike engine buzzing nearby. Then a dragonfly the size of a hawk flies out from the ferns and cuts through the air as it hunts. This wasn't a dream. It happened in the late Carboniferous and early Permian eras, more than 300 million years ago. And it was all because of something that couldn't be seen: air. During this prehistoric time, Earth's atmosphere was radically different from today. Oxygen levels peaked as high as 35%, compared to the 21% we breathe now. This supercharged air didn't just make breathing easier, it allowed insects and arthropods to grow to monstrous sizes, far beyond what's possible today. Scientists call this phenomenon the bug boom. At the center of it all was Meganeura, a dragonfly-like predator with a wingspan over 2.5 feet. With enormous compound eyes, serrated mandibles, and spined legs for snatching prey, Meganeura ruled the skies. It didn't just flutter around like a modern dragonfly. It patrolled the canopy like a flying raptor, hunting beetles, larvae, and possibly even small amphibians. Its massive wings allowed it to glide efficiently over long distances, and in the rich oxygen atmosphere, flight was easier, faster, and deadlier. But the nightmare didn't stop with dragonflies. On the forest floor crawled giant millipedes like Arthropleura, stretching up to 9 feet long. These were technically not insects, but were part of the same arthropod family. They likely fed on decaying plants, but were so large and armored that even the earliest vertebrates gave them a wide berth. Giant cockroaches, many over 4 inches long, scurried through the leaf litter. Fossilized wings show they could glide or flutter over short distances. Some had spines, while others likely hissed or released chemical sprays to defend themselves, behaviors still seen in smaller versions today. Then there were scorpions the size of cats, like Pulmonoscorpius, whose fossils suggest it could have hunted prey above ground, possibly using venom and brute force. Their exoskeletons were thick, their pincers were massive, and in the low light of the Carboniferous jungle, they would have been nearly invisible until it was too late. So why was air so important? Bugs don't breathe like people do. As their exoskeletons don't have lungs, they get oxygen through tiny tubes called spiracles. These tubes split off into a network of air-filled trachea. The way the environment works now means that oxygen can only spread so far, which limits how big a bug can get. It happened faster and deeper, with 35% oxygen though, which boosted their biology and lifted the size cap. In simple terms, more air meant more bugs. The jungle itself was also partly responsible. The vast swamp forests of the Carboniferous were filled with giant lycopods, ferns, and mossy trees that grew tall and fast, sucking in carbon dioxide and pumping out oxygen. These plants formed dense canopies with little wind and tons of moisture, perfect conditions for insect growth. Plus, the dead plant matter built up faster than it could rot, creating layers of oxygen-rich peat. This would eventually form the coal beds we mine today. This world was too hot and full of air, which made competition burst. Bugs' wings got bigger, their mouths got stronger, and their habits got more complicated. Some turned into hunters, while others made shells with armor to protect themselves from them. There are fossils of insects fighting each other, with broken jaws and torn wings, found in ponds from long ago. The noise would have been very loud. Insects talk to each other by stridulation, which means moving body parts together. When their bodies got bigger, the noise they made got louder. Think of a jungle where the air was full of screeches, rattles, and clicking sounds. Each one was a bug sending a message to a mate, or to a rival bug. It was never quiet in the jungle. The bug boom did stop, though, like all booms do. As Earth moved into the late Permian period, the temperature changed, the countries moved, and there was a lot of volcanic activity. The amount of oxygen started to drop. Giant insects couldn't keep their bodies going or fly well when they had less air. They got smaller over time. A lot of them died out. The lush swamps dried up, and the woods changed into places that were less tropical and more seasonal. Trudons and the jungle intelligence arms race. Muscle and teeth ruled the world, and smart animals were few and far between. But in the late Cretaceous woods, one animal started to break the rules. Trudon was a small dinosaur that looked like a bird. It wasn't the biggest, fastest, or strongest hunter, but it might have been the smartest, which made it one of the most dangerous in the thick undergrowth of past woods. Trudon lived around 75 to 66 million years ago, during the very end of the dinosaur era. Its fossils have been found across North America, in what used to be warm, wet environments filled with rivers, ferns, and towering conifers. At around 6 to 9 feet long and just 3 feet tall, Trudon wasn't a terrifying brute like a T-Rex, but it had other advantages. Let's start with its brain. Trudon had the largest brain-to-body ratio of any known non-avian dinosaur. Its brain was relatively large and complex, with structures similar to those in modern birds. That means enhanced vision, coordination, memory, and problem-solving skills. In modern animals, these traits are often linked to advanced hunting techniques, tool use, or complex social behaviors. Think about that kind of animal following you through the woods. Trudon had eyes that faced forward, which gave it binocular vision, which was important for figuring out how deep things were, and following moving objects through thick greenery. The big size of its eye holes and sclerotic rings, the bones inside the eye, in some fossils even suggest that it could see well at night. This makes me think that Trudon may have been busy at night, or at least between dusk and dawn, when the bush was most dangerous. Its body was built for agility. Trudon had long legs with grasping claws, perfect for dashing between trees or pouncing from cover. Its long tail acted like a counterbalance, letting it turn sharply or leap with precision. The hands had 3 clawed fingers, likely used to grab prey or manipulate objects, another sign of complex behavior. What did it hunt? Most likely small reptiles, mammals, insects, and possibly baby dinosaurs. But it wasn't just about brute hunting. Trudon's intelligence may have allowed it to stalk prey silently, using the jungle's thick cover for ambush. Some paleontologists believe it may have used pack hunting tactics, coordinating with others to flush prey or take down larger animals. There's a theory, still debated, that Trudon could mimic sounds, like bird calls or even baby cries, to lure prey into traps. While there's no direct fossil evidence, modern-day birds, which are descendants of theropods like Trudon, are capable of incredible vocal mimicry. If Trudon had similar vocal structures, it might have used jungle noise as a weapon, a false sense of safety before the strike. The jungle was the perfect setting for this kind of predator. Dense with ferns, cycads, and tangled vines, it limited the vision of larger dinosaurs. Ambush predators had the edge, and in the competition for survival, brainpower started to matter. Troodon was possibly the first dinosaur to benefit from an intelligence arms race. A gradual rise in mental capabilities to outwit prey, competitors, and predators. Its eggs offer more clues. Fossilized Troodon nests show eggs arranged in spirals or clusters, suggesting that Troodon may have cared for its young, like birds and crocodiles do today. Parental care requires more complex behavior, guarding the nest, regulating temperature, and possibly feeding hatchlings. That's another mark of intelligence, and a sign that Troodon's brain wasn't just for hunting, it was for survival in a social, adaptive world. Many scientists have even said that if the asteroid hadn't hit, Troodon's offspring might have turned into humanoid forms, or dinosauroids that were upright, clever, and used tools. That idea has been thrown out for the most part, but it shows how far ahead of its time Troodon was. Ambush predators of the night. Nocturnal horror in the jungle. The danger didn't go away when the sun went down below the cover and it got very dark in the bush. It just changed shape. When it got dark in ancient times, it didn't bring peace. It brought a new wave of fear. During the day, huge predators and swarms of buzzing insects ruled. At night, though, the ambush hunters, creatures that had evolved to sneak up on their prey, attack, and disappear, took over. A lot of people think of dinosaurs as being active during the day, but fossils show that some species were perfectly suited for hunting at night. Paleontologists have used preserved eye sockets and the sclerotic ring, a ring of bones inside the eye, to guess how much light an animal could take in. This is a key sign for figuring out if the animal was active at night. One such predator was Velociraptor, known from fossils in Mongolia. While often portrayed as a pack-hunting daytime predator, its eye structure suggests it may have been more effective in low light, possibly ambushing prey at dawn, dusk, or night. With keen vision, sharp claws, and a lightweight, agile build, Velociraptor could have slipped through the underbrush and struck when its prey couldn't see it coming. Then there's the eerie case of Troodon, which we met in the last chapter. Its large eyes and sclerotic ring indicate excellent night vision, suggesting it was one of the first true nocturnal theropods. With high intelligence, long legs, and grasping hands, Troodon may have used moonlight to its advantage, weaving silently through the jungle, hunting smaller reptiles, mammals, and even eggs. At night, its brain and vision made it a silent assassin. There were other hunts in the dark besides dinosaurs, though. Early mammals were already getting used to living at night, mostly to escape bigger, colder animals that were after them. Small animals that looked like marsupials dashed through the leaf litter, and flying mammals may have jumped from branch to branch in complete silence to avoid being eaten by predators or to catch insects and eggs for themselves. This activity at night would be very important for life after the extinction event. The night jungle also favored pterosaurs, especially smaller species like Geholopterus, which had wings adapted for maneuvering between trees and may have fed on insects or blood, like a prehistoric bat. Some researchers have even proposed that certain pterosaurs were nocturnal feeders, using sensitive vision and echo-like calls to navigate tight spaces under the canopy. And what about the bugs? Many prehistoric insects were far more active at night. Fossils show evidence of night-dwelling beetles and moth-like insects as early as the Jurassic. With the jungle so hot during the day, the cooler, quieter night gave insects a chance to move, feed, and breed, which in turn attracted predators that followed them. The buzzing, clicking, and fluttering sounds of the ancient forest at night would have been relentless, setting the stage for predators that hunted by sound as much as by sight. It's possible that the snake-like animals that came out at night were one of the scariest predators. It's not that early snakes and lizards were big, but they were quiet, patient, and often poisonous. Their fossils are rare, but the structure of their ear bones suggests they were tuned to low-frequency vibrations, the kind made by footfalls or rustling prey. In the dark, this sense made them deadly. Even some of the larger herbivores had to adapt, certain ceratopsians and hadrosaurs show signs of wide peripheral vision, possibly a defense against nighttime stalkers. These plant eaters may have slept in tight groups or taken turns standing guard, much like modern herd animals, to survive the unseen threats of the jungle darkness. Swamp gas, methane, and the jungle that choked life out. A fang or a claw wasn't always the most frightening thing in the ancient wild. Sometimes it was just the air. In the Earth's huge, hot swamps in the past, especially in the Carboniferous and early Permian times, something bad was cooking just below the surface. It was easy for dangerous gases like methane, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon dioxide to build up in these jungles because they were full of dead plants, still water, and little airflow. Not only did these gases smell bad, but they could also kill whole areas of wildlife in seconds. When plant matter dies and decomposes in low-oxygen, waterlogged environments, like a dense jungle floor or swamp, bacteria break it down in a process that releases methane, CH4. This odorless, flammable gas builds up in mud, under roots, or inside water pockets. Normally it disperses into the air, but in prehistoric times, the combination of dense canopy, high humidity, and almost no wind meant the gas could get trapped, forming invisible pockets that hugged the ground. Consider a dinosaur, maybe a young hadrosaur, walking into a part of the jungle that has been sunk. There's no smell to it. It feels weak after a while. Its legs move around. Its brain is dying of lack of air. It falls apart in minutes, not because of a predator, but because of an environment that is high in methane and low in oxygen. Death from swamp gas. Then there's hydrogen sulfide, H2S, the gas that smells like rotten eggs. It's produced when bacteria break down organic matter without oxygen, especially in swamps and stagnant pools. In small amounts, it's irritating. In large amounts, it's lethal. H2S paralyzes the nervous system, causing animals to collapse before they even know what hit them. And because it's heavier than air, it settles in low-lying areas, exactly where dinosaurs and other creatures drank, grazed, or nested. Fossil beds in places like the Posidonia Shale in Germany and the Green River Formation in the US show mass death layers, clusters of fish, reptiles, and even plants preserved together, sometimes in strange, unnatural positions. These layers often form in places where scientists suspect anoxic events occurred, meaning the water or air temporarily lost all oxygen, likely due to a sudden release of toxic gas from below. In jungles near volcanic areas, things got even worse. Volcanic activity could heat underground gas pockets, causing them to erupt like invisible geysers. There are modern examples, like Lake Nyos in Cameroon, where a sudden release of CO2 in 1986 suffocated over 1,700 people and thousands of animals without warning. It's not hard to imagine similar events happening in the prehistoric world, especially near fault lines or tectonic rifts where volcanic and swamp systems overlapped. But the real horror, sometimes these gases caught fire. Methane is highly flammable. If lightning struck a gas-rich swamp, the entire area could erupt into a flash firestorm, a wall of flame racing through dry plant material and gas pockets. There are charred fossil layers, known as fossil charcoal beds, that suggest massive fires swept through certain prehistoric forests, possibly triggered by natural gas ignition. One spark could turn a peaceful, foggy jungle into a burning inferno in minutes. For smaller animals like insects, amphibians, and early mammals, the risk wasn't just fire or suffocation. The buildup of gases could mess with behavior. Low oxygen leads to confusion, dizziness, and panic. Fossils of fish with twisted spines, insects trapped mid-molt, and reptiles caught mid-crawl hint at toxic events that struck without warning, turning life into statues before death. Even larger predators weren't safe. A giant dinosaur could fall into a gas pocket and die on the spot. In some fossil dig sites, paleontologists have found skeletons of herbivores and carnivores piled together, showing no signs of violence. One theory: they all died from invisible gas. This happened more than once. It's possible that these things happened with the seasons, when changes in temperature shook up the swamps and let gas that had been hidden come out. or during droughts when the mud dried out and cracked open, letting out fumes. For millions of years, these death zones have been a part of the environment. They are like natural gas traps that kill again and again. Hidden fossils from Southeast Asia's lost dinosaur rainforests. People often think of Hell Creek in North America or the Badlands in Mongolia when they think of dinosaurs. But some of the most strange, lush and poorly understood places for dinosaurs to live may have been in Southeast Asia, in places that were once tropical jungles. These woods were probably as dense with plants, wet with rain, and full of life as any in the Amazon today. But there's a catch. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface. That's because the heat, humidity, and rain that made these jungles so successful were also terrible for fossils. In the Mesozoic era, there were thick tropical forests, floodplains, and ecosystems that looked like mangroves in places like Thailand, Laos, Myanmar, Malaysia, and Vietnam today. These places used to be home to dinosaurs, flying lizards, and early birds that evolved separately, but today there aren't many fossils to be found here. Why? Soil that is acidic, plants that die quickly, and heavy runoff can all break down or kill bones before they can fossilize. Even with these problems, fascinating clues have been found. Paleontologists have found pieces of sauropods, spinosaurids, and theropods from the early Cretaceous in Thailand's Phu Yang National Park. One interesting find is Siamotyrannus aizenensis, a long-lost relative of the tyrannosaur family. It wasn't quite the top hunter that T-Rex would become, but it shows that around 120 million years ago, big meat-eating dinosaurs were already living in the woods of Southeast Asia. Further north, in Laos, fossil sites in the Grèce Supérieure Formation have yielded remains of rich river delta ecosystems, including freshwater fish, crocodilians, and the dinosaur Tangvaosaurus, a sauropod with features unique to the region. Its presence suggests that the forests of this region were filled with massive herbivores, likely feeding on tall cycads, conifers, and the first flowering plants beginning to spread across the Cretaceous world. In Myanmar, the story takes a different turn. Rather than full dinosaur bones, the region is famous for Cretaceous amber deposits, specifically from the Hukang Valley. This amber has preserved some of the most stunning snapshots of prehistoric life: feathers, insects, lizards, and even dinosaur tails. In 2016, researchers described a piece of amber containing a feathered dinosaur tail, complete with bones, soft tissue, and perfectly preserved plumage. The tail belonged to a small coelurosaur, likely no larger than a sparrow, but it offers incredible insight into how dinosaurs lived, looked, and interacted with their jungle environment. What makes Southeast Asia's fossil record so unique is that it may have held isolated evolutionary branches, creatures that don't show up in the fossil records of Europe, China, or North America. The thick forests and geographic barriers, like shallow seas and mountain ranges, likely created pockets of evolution where species developed strange regional adaptations. This is similar to how today's islands produce unique species, like Komodo dragons or Bornean clouded leopards. But because the forests were so wet, acidic, and active, most of what lived there never fossilized. When an animal died, its body didn't get buried and preserved. Instead, it was quickly broken down by bacteria, scavenged by insects, or dissolved by the acidic soil. The rapid plant growth also meant that ground sediment shifted constantly, making it hard for remains to stay in one place long enough to fossilize. Because of this, every fossil found in Southeast Asia is a valuable tip, and every spot could change the game. The difficulties of digging here are also very high. It's hard to get to places like Laos and Vietnam that are in the hot woods or mountains. Forms of rock are hidden by thick tree cover. Political and financial problems make drilling take longer. Also, when it rains, shallow fossil beds are often washed away before they can be fully explored. Paleontologists are beginning to use remote sensing technology, ground-penetrating radar, and satellite imagery to identify possible dig sites hidden beneath the jungle. These tools are helping scientists find places where erosion or mining has exposed fossil-rich layers. Dawn of the apes, Gigantopithecus in the bamboo jungle. A new kind of wild monster showed up a long time after the dinosaurs died out and before cities grew. It wasn't a bug or a lizard. Gigantopithecus was the biggest ape that ever lived. It lived in the bamboo jungles of Southeast Asia. It may have looked like a walking nightmare. It wasn't a monster from folklore. It was real, and it lived with early human cousins. It was up to 10 feet tall and nearly 1,100 pounds. Gigantopithecus thrived during the Pleistocene epoch, between 2 million and 300,000 years ago. Its fossils have been found in China, Vietnam, Thailand, and India, particularly in limestone cave systems, where molars and jawbones have survived the ravages of time. Although no full skeleton has been recovered, scientists have been able to reconstruct a rough picture of this giant using comparative anatomy, mostly by studying its closest living relatives, orangutans. The results are both fascinating and unsettling. Gigantopithecus was likely a ground-dwelling herbivore that moved slowly through the dense bamboo jungles that blanketed much of Southeast Asia. Unlike tree-swinging apes, its massive size and weight made climbing unlikely. Instead, it would have moved deliberately, pushing through thick vegetation, foraging for food. Its primary diet, bamboo, much like the modern panda. Its molars were flat, broad, and designed for grinding tough plant material, and its jaw was strong enough to crush fibrous stalks. But it wasn't picky. Some evidence suggests Gigantopithecus also ate fruits, seeds, and even small roots. It likely needed to eat a lot every day to sustain its massive bulk. Even though it wasn't a predator, it might have been highly territorial. Picture a very early human, maybe Homo erectus, looking for a place to hide in the trees. It's raining hard in the bush, and all of a sudden, the trees start to shake. Not because of a storm, from a big thing. Something is looking. Fossil sites show that early humans and Gigantopithecus lived in the same areas, and it's possible that they fought. Would it have attacked a human? Not for food. But like many modern apes, it may have defended its territory, especially if it felt threatened. A 10-foot ape charging through bamboo, fists pounding the ground, roaring in warning. That would have been enough to send any early human running. Its home, the Pleistocene rainforests of Southeast Asia, were already wild. These forests were thick with bamboo, fig trees, palms, and tangled vines. Tigers, leopards, and crocodiles prowled the shadows. Elephants, rhinos, and massive deer moved in herds through forest clearings. And somewhere in that ecosystem, Gigantopithecus moved silently, eating, watching, surviving. So why did it disappear? The leading theory is climate change. As the ice ages progressed, Southeast Asia's rainforests began to shrink. Bamboo became less abundant. Open grasslands began to replace jungle in many areas. Gigantopithecus, which relied on thick forest cover and specialized food, couldn't adapt fast enough. Its size, once its advantage, became a burden. Unlike smaller, more flexible primates, it couldn't travel far to find food. And it may not have had the brainpower or social tools to adapt to rapidly changing environments. Researchers also think that competition with early humans might have had something to do with it. Homo erectus hunted, gathered, and burned land to make clearings as they moved across Asia. They might have hurt Gigantopithecus's food sources and environment, even if they didn't hunt it directly. These days, only bones and teeth are left. But Gigantopithecus lives on in stories and tales from the area. Some people think it was the source of stories about the Yeti or the orang pendek, huge wild creatures that walk like people but aren't people. Even though these stories haven't been proven, they bring back a deep memory. The thought that we once lived in the jungle with something huge, strong, and real. The monster we'll never fully know, Spinosaurus in the river forests. Most dinosaurs are pretty scary, but Spinosaurus aegyptiacus is one of the most annoyingly mysterious. It was longer than a T-Rex, had weirder features than any theropod, and might have been the only dinosaur ever found that lived in water. Spinosaurus didn't live on dry fields or open woods like most prehistoric predators did, though. It might have lived deep in the river woods and mangrove jungles of ancient North Africa, an environment that is hard to find in fossils. Spinosaurus lived around 95 million years ago, during the mid-Cretaceous period, in what is now Egypt, Morocco, and Niger. But back then, this region was a lush, swampy delta. Picture a tangled network of rivers, lakes, and forested wetlands, surrounded by ferns, palms, and tropical conifers. This was the Kem beds, one of the richest dinosaur fossil zones in Africa. Now consider a creature strolling through the jungle along the river without making a sound. It was 50 feet long, had a head like a crocodile's, long narrow jaws with conical teeth, and a device on its back that looked like a sail and was as tall as a man. That was Spinosaurus. But unlike some other theropods, it wasn't made to hunt on land. Its short back legs, thick bones, and flattened tail all made it look like it moved like a crocodile. For years, paleontologists debated whether Spinosaurus was a land-based predator or a fish specialist. But recent fossil discoveries, including a nearly complete tail found in Morocco in 2020, revealed that its tail was paddle-shaped, ideal for side-to-side propulsion in water. Combined with bone density studies showing unusually heavy bones for a theropod to reduce buoyancy, Spinosaurus now appears to have been a semi-aquatic ambush predator, the only known dinosaur to fully adapt to a water-based hunting lifestyle. Its jungle home was just as bizarre. The river systems were packed with massive fish like Onchopristis, a sawfish-like giant with blade-like snouts, and coelacanths the size of cars. Crocodile-like reptiles, some over 30 feet long, competed with Spinosaurus for food. This wasn't a quiet rainforest. It was a churning, loud, prehistoric marsh filled with hissing, splashing, and bellowing predators, each waiting for a moment to strike. Spinosaurus may have spent most of its time wading through shallow channels, using its long jaws to snap up fish, or lurking beneath the surface to ambush anything that moved. Its nostrils were located farther back on its skull, letting it breathe while partially submerged. Its claws, long and hooked, may have helped it grapple slippery prey or pull itself up riverbanks. But despite its terrifying presence, we still don't fully understand Spinosaurus. Its fossils are fragmentary, scattered, and often poorly preserved. The original bones, discovered by German paleontologist Ernst Stromer in Egypt in the early 1900s, were destroyed during World War II. Since then, scientists have been piecing together new material from sites across North Africa. But it's a slow process, made even harder by the region's harsh deserts and political instability. And then there's the sail, that bizarre, towering structure rising from its back. Formed by elongated neural spines, it may have been used for display, thermoregulation, or mating rituals. Or maybe it helped stabilize the dinosaur in water, like a fin. We don't know. It's one of many pieces of the Spinosaurus puzzle that still doesn't quite fit. Buried alive, the jungle traps that fossilized whole ecosystems. Fossils usually make us think of bones that have been broken, strewn around, and browned over time. But in a few select places, whole ecosystems from long ago have been frozen in time. Not only bones, but also plants, animals, insects, and even whole food chains were kept alive during a disaster. In the jungles of ancient times, these events were caused by natural disasters like sudden mudslides, flash floods, and volcanic ash falls that buried living things alive and turned lively, noisy woods into instant tombs. Unlike dry plains where bones can scatter, jungles are usually the worst places for fossilization. The heat, rain, and bacteria eat away at organic matter quickly, but when disaster struck fast enough, even the jungle couldn't decompose the dead before they were locked in stone and silence. Messel Pit in Germany is one of the best-known examples. It is a place that was once a tropical lake surrounded by thick forest 48 million years ago, during the Eocene. Animals here didn't just die, they got caught in a trap. Scientists think that poisonous gases would quickly rise and kill everything nearby. These gases could be coming from volcanic activity under the lake. Birds crashed while in the air. Primates killed while they were trying to get away. Fur, feathers, stomach contents, and sometimes even the looks on the faces of insects, turtles, fish, and even bats are used to keep them alive. It's one of the most full pictures ever found of a jungle in the past. Another extraordinary site is Fushun, China, where a prehistoric swamp was buried under layers of volcanic ash and silt. The explosion was so violent and fast that entire groves of trees, including roots and ferns, were entombed while still standing. Fossilized tree trunks were preserved in place, with insects frozen on their bark and leaves still clinging to branches. The ash captured the final instant of a rainforest just before it was silenced. Then there's the Crato and Santana formations of Brazil, part of the ancient Araripe Basin, which used to be covered by warm, humid jungle lagoons during the early Cretaceous. Here, mass mortality events, likely from sudden droughts or chemical shifts in the water, killed fish, amphibians, and insects in huge numbers. Their remains settled gently into lime-rich sediment, creating fossils so detailed that even the veins in dragonfly wings and the scales on fish are still visible. These layers also contain preserved flowers, pollen, and small pterosaurs. A complete jungle food web, buried and sealed under pressure for over 100 million years. Some of the most chilling fossil beds are those that show animals trapped mid-action. In the famous Liaoning province of China, a series of volcanic eruptions covered entire forests in fine ash, much like what happened in Pompeii. Dinosaurs, birds, and early mammals are preserved mid-run, with feathers and skin impressions still intact. Fossilized leaves and insects share the same layers, showing that an entire living environment was snuffed out in seconds. Many of these creatures appear to have died gasping for air. And it wasn't just ash. Mudslides in steep jungle valleys, triggered by intense rain or earthquakes, could bury everything in their path. Animals would be caught off guard, swept into thick sludge, along with trees, insects, and everything else alive. In places like the ashfall fossil beds of Nebraska, once a lush subtropical savanna, piles of skeletons are found layered together, their bones still articulated. Some show signs of injury from the collapse, while others died standing, choking on ash and gas. A predator with its food still in its mouth, a pair of insects mating, or a plant in the middle of bloom are a few examples of interactions that have been preserved to a remarkable degree. When the jungle is frozen, it's a rare miracle of time, pressure, and geography. All of them start the same way, though, in a jungle full of life that doesn't know when its last moment will come. Could you survive it? Reconstructing the smell, heat, and sounds. Suppose you went back in time and woke up in the middle of a jungle from a long time ago. It could have been in the late Cretaceous, the Carboniferous, or the Permian. Could you make it through? Let's be honest. Probably not. Because the first thing to hit you wouldn't be a dinosaur or a giant insect. It would be the air, thick, wet, and nearly impossible to breathe. The humidity alone would feel like walking into a steaming bathroom that never cools down. Some ancient rainforests, like those in the Paleocene or Carboniferous, had humidity levels over 90% and temperatures regularly above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Your clothes would be soaked in minutes. Your skin would feel sticky, hot, and constantly under siege from moisture and fungal spores. Think about trying to walk. The ground isn't level. It's a jumbled mess of ferns, vines, mud, and downed trees. Tree ferns and giant lycopods grew in tight groups in the Carboniferous. The tops were low, so it was hard to see through them. You would only be able to see a few feet ahead. It would be too soft for your boots. Every step you take could land you in a root hole, a puddle, or even a living thing's nest. And then there's the smell. You're not used to it. Today's forests smell earthy, maybe a bit mossy, but a prehistoric jungle, that would be a chemical assault. Rotting vegetation, stagnant water, sulfur from swamp gas, the sweet-sour stench of fermenting fruit, and the unmistakable scent of carrion left by predators. Every breath would taste like decay. In the post-impact jungles after the asteroid strike, the smell would be even worse. Imagine a forest soaked in death, ash and mold, with the air thickened by fungal blooms and decomposing animals. and the sound. You'd never sleep. The prehistoric jungle was never quiet. Giant insects like Meganeura buzzed with wings as loud as paper fans. Frogs, some as big as dogs, croaked in bass notes. In the Cretaceous, the jungle echoed with the calls of dinosaurs, trumpeting hadrosaurs, screeching dromaeosaurs, and deep rumbling bellows from the canopy. Some of these calls may have been used to locate mates or threaten rivals, and their low frequencies could travel for miles, vibrating through your chest. At night, it didn't calm down. It just changed. Nocturnal predators like Truden or early mammals rustled through the underbrush. Insects clicked, scraped, and hissed. You might not see anything, but you'd hear leaves moving, branches breaking, something breathing. And in those moments, your modern flashlight wouldn't help you. The darkness would feel alive, pressing in from all sides. Let's say you make it through the terrain without being eaten by a predator. The next task is to stay living. The water? You shouldn't drink it because it has germs and parasites that you have never seen before. The air? In air, it can be thinner or thicker based on the time. In the Carboniferous, you would be low on oxygen. After a hit in the Paleocene, you might feel weak and dizzy. Your defense system isn't ready for the world of microbes from the past. Even the plants are dangerous. Some early ferns and seed plants may have had mild toxins to ward off herbivores. Touching the wrong leaf might irritate your skin. Tripping into a nest of spore-producing fungi could trigger breathing issues, especially in high spore density zones like rotting logs or stagnant pools. And don't forget about giant insects. Not all of them harmless. A scorpion the size of a cat doesn't need to be venomous to cause damage with its pinchers alone. You wouldn't last long without gear either. You can't find any fruit trees or safe food to eat, and there aren't many places to hide from the heat or rain. Without modern tools, it would be very hard to build a fire in this damp world. Even if you did, the smoke would make people notice you, and you don't want that in a world full of sneaky predators. Your senses would betray you too. Everything would feel too loud, too hot, too close. Your vision would be blocked by vegetation, your hearing overwhelmed by overlapping sounds, and your body constantly pushed to the edge by the sheer sensory chaos. If you thought today's jungles were wild, just remember, the real monsters, the real horror, lived millions of years ago, in forests that could choke you, swallow you, or tear you apart without a sound. These were ecosystems built on chaos, survival, and fear. If you enjoyed this journey into Earth's darkest past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below telling us which prehistoric terror shocked you the most. There's more where that came from, and the next nightmare might be even closer than you think.